Hi everybody and welcome. We're about to go down into my wormery, but like we do sometimes, we're going to check in onto my tracking spreadsheet just so we can get a sense of what we're trying to accomplish today before we head down there. And I figured I would just briefly outline this for everybody. So the ones that are in mention right now are the yellow lines here, which are roughly dated back to the 26th of May, tracking at 138 days old now. And if you look over here, the parents of those two containers, which are presently my two pink pots, were the European nightcrawler cocoons, which were originally started in this little green pail. And the tiny green pail is not active anymore since I moved them into the pink pots. And other than that, there's the African nightcrawlers that are in the second pink pot. And those were originally launched off in the 3-chamber time-lapse bin, the nursery bin. And I think the time has come to upgrade the space for these little guys. They were originally started African nightcrawlers with 100 cocoons. European nightcrawlers were originally started with 500 cocoons. So I got a little bit more of a larger population of European nightcrawlers as opposed to the African nightcrawlers. But if you look down here, these are my different bins, and if you look down here at the very bottom, you could see that I'm preparing to launch off two new bins that have never been used before. I've got a VermiBag tote, and I've got a VermiBag mini. So the VermiBag tote is going to come up here in the place of what the African nightcrawlers are using. The tote is going to become the new home for these African nightcrawlers, the 100 African nightcrawlers, or whatever it is that hatched out of 100 cocoons. And then the VermiBag mini is going to become the new home for the European nightcrawlers that started out as 500 cocoons. So I'm heading down there now, and why don't you join me? And hopefully we'll be able to check out some worms in the process of relocating my my nightcrawlers. Let's go. So now scattered about here on my workbench, there's a whole variety of different things. There's a whole bunch of newspaper that I ran through the shredder. Usually I don't use that much newspaper shredded up as bedding, but I figured I'd give it a try here. I've also got a little bit of diced up cardboard that I was going to get rid of. You'll remember that this is the box that I usually keep my crushed leaves in, and this is the container that I usually keep the spent coffee grinds in that come out of the coffee machine upstairs. And down here in the yellow container, you could see a few pieces of pumpkin. And you know, it's almost a year now, I guess, since I hacked up those pumpkins over there, and I threw them in my freezer, so I thought it was high time to put them to good use. So over here is the VermiBag tote, as you can see, sitting in its nice new frame that I constructed. And into this we're going to be placing the African nightcrawlers. The African nightcrawlers are right here in this pink pot, the first one. And over here in the second pink pot, the one with the label on it, that's the one that's got the European nightcrawlers in it. And you know, over here I've just got a couple pieces of paper. The piece of paper I was envisioning as a piece of cover just to put on top of the material within the VermiBag tote. And then this piece of cardboard here I cut to size so that it can become the cover that goes over the stuff that goes down into here, which is the this is the VermiBag mini. The label for it is over here on the other side. And this is the larger of the two containers, obviously, and this is the one that's going to be housing the 500 European nightcrawlers. And the VermiBag tote is where we're going to be placing the, I keep referring to it as 100 African nightcrawlers, but I believe that when a cocoon, a worm cocoon hatches, more than one worm can potentially come out of a cocoon or something like that. So either way, I keep referring to the populations as what hatched from either 100 or 500 cocoons. So I can't really tell you exactly how many worms are in each of these. And you know, today we're at day 138, as you saw on the spreadsheet. So it is possible that these have already been reproducing, so the numbers might have been growing. But you know, sometimes if the if the space is limited or food is limited, then the worms won't reproduce. So I don't know if the limited space could have been hindering procreation and breeding, but my hope is that once we get them into the larger containers, that issue, if it even exists, will be a thing of the past. So let's start getting these guys set up with their new home. Well, regrettably, I was having some problems with the camera, and I thought the entire time while I was launching this bin, setting it up and launching the African nightcrawlers into it, I thought it was filming, but apparently it was not. So we kind of missed out on some of this footage. So apologies about that. I don't know what happened there, but basically I dampened down a bunch of the shredded newspaper that I have, as well as those few pieces of cardboard that I showed earlier. I laid down all that dampened material on the bottom and sprinkled a little bit of ground up leaves in there, and then I went ahead and I placed in some food, which consisted of a few pieces of the pumpkin, as well as some coffee grinds and a little bit of pulverized eggshell for grit. And then I went ahead and I just dumped out the African nightcrawlers into here, and we poked around a little bit, checking them out, and then I covered up the whole setup with crushed leaves. So it's kind of a bummer that that section got missed, but there's no redoing it. It's done now. So this bin is officially started on day 138. So not to say started, I guess continued in a larger space. So now the African nightcrawlers have a large place to hang out and to spread out. So hopefully they'll be happy in here, and we'll be checking in on this on a regular basis. But luckily, we've still got the European nightcrawlers. So the European nightcrawlers are in this pink pot right here, and they're going right down into this VermiBag Mini. I'm going to launch this one off in a very similar way to how I launched the African nightcrawlers, but with a little bit of a difference. With this bin, since it's a flow-through, and by flow-through that basically means the harvesting of the compost, once it's all done, consists of opening the hatch at the bottom and just removing the compost out the bottom. So I'm very interested in having whatever's at the bottom of this bin be fully and thoroughly composted. So I didn't want to overload the bottom of this bin with a whole bunch of stuff that might just sit there and never get eaten by the worms. So I wanted to put just a limited amount of newspaper down there, dampened newspaper. Okay. So I don't want to load up the bottom of this excessively, because what I want down at the very bottom in the middle is nice, clean, finished compost, so that when it comes time to harvest this, it's not littered with all kinds of uneaten food and stuff like that. So I'm just going to build a little bit of a perimeter of bedding here. Kind of like that. Then I want to take the food that I've got for them and place that in here. Like so. And I got a little bit of water pooled up down there now, so I guess I will just take a little bit of shredded newspaper and jam it down into that hole in the hopes that it sucks up that standing water that dripped down into there. Right here now, I figured I would just dump in the European nightcrawlers. So just going to go ahead and, I'm going to pull this inside liner really in there. Okay. And I do see 1 or 2 worms that are kind of like hanging out in the space that was in between the black and the pink pots. So I'll be sure to reclaim those little stragglers to make sure they don't get lost in the shuffle. But I'm just going to go ahead and dump out the container right down into the middle. Luckily this pot has a little hole in the middle that I can grab it by. Let's get the camera down here a little bit closer. Okay. I don't really see any worms hanging out down there. So I'm just going to scrape out whatever remains and get it out of here. A little bit of newspaper, a little bit of leafy material. Luckily not too much. I don't see any worms hanging out on the outside of this. So I believe we've got everybody now. And finally, as promised, I'm just going to make sure we don't leave any little guys behind over in here. So I do see a couple of them hanging out. Come on, let go. Oh, there he goes. Hopefully we've got everyone. Oh, no, here's a third one. A little guy. It's promising to see a little tiny worm in here. That might be an indication that these worms are reproducing. Alright, I believe I just found another one. Here we go. Why don't we take this piece of wood that I have here and just probe around a little bit. I guess I could use my hands too since I'm wearing gloves. So now, when I was probing around, checking out the African nightcrawlers, it did seem to me like I was only seeing fairly large size adult worms, leading me to think that perhaps they were not yet old enough at 138 days or thereabouts to be in a reproductive phase of their lives yet. So these worms were also launched at around the same time, or pretty much exactly the same time, I would say. So they're in that same age range. But what's interesting is that from looking around this material here, I really expected to see far more worms hanging out in here. I really regret not capturing the footage of the African nightcrawlers getting released into the VermiBag tote, because the number of worms in that container almost seemed like more than this, which is a little bit counterintuitive, because I was almost certain that this would be numerous times larger in population than the African nightcrawlers, since there were many more cocoons that these launched off from. But it's almost fair to say at this point that I've probably got about an equal number of worms. I always was under what I think it was a misinterpretation or misimpression that I've got so many more European nightcrawlers, but I don't think that's really the case. And I mean, I could be wrong. These little guys could have just seen the light overhead and started diving straight down into that damp newspaper and towards that pumpkin down below. So maybe I'm just not seeing them because I didn't react quick enough after dumping them in here, but I really don't know. I'm not sure what to expect, but hopefully we're giving them a nice new home here, and they appreciate the extra space that they're being given to hang out in. Okay, so before I put on my typical leaf cover that I normally scatter along the top of my new bins, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this bin a little bit of an additional feeding in addition to the pumpkin that I laid in before. I'm going to put in some coffee grounds, just scatter it across the top loosely. Okay. And then to complement that, and I could have probably put some of this onto the pumpkin as well, but whatever. I'm just going to take this pulverized eggshell and scatter it across the coffee so that they've got grit to aid in their digestion. I don't have much left in this container, so maybe I'll just deplete what's remaining here. and give it to them all. Ooh, nice and dusty. Try not to breathe that stuff in. And then that leads to covering up the whole shebang with some leaf cover. And I'm not going to go overboard on putting too much leaf cover in here. I think that should be adequate. I've got a nice piece of cardboard that I crafted to fit on top. So we'll just go ahead and rest this right here over the top of it. So that should really help a lot with keeping the moisture down within the bottom of the bin. Did seem like I had a number of technical difficulties along the way here, and maybe I was just a little bit distracted with the new exciting bins that I've got here. But I've now got my European nightcrawlers and then my African nightcrawlers out of their pink pots and into their new homes. So hopefully they'll be happy there, and it'll be exciting to see what sort of results we get from these new containers. So just wanted to put a big shout out to Tom. Tom, thanks a lot for these cool containers from VermiBag, VermiBag Tote, VermiBag Mini, and we'll see how they perform. I'm sure they'll do great. Thanks everyone. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And also consider signing up to be a subscriber to the channel. That's always really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Bye now.